Hey everyone, my name is Lizzie and today we'll be replicating red wine. So when you think of red wine, what is the first thing you think about? That it's red. Therefore, we should start off with the liquid that is red, or you could put food coloring. Personally, I'd rather avoid food coloring and just make it natural. One thing not to add if you want to replicate red wine is to add juice that's not red, and that could come in the form of grape juice. We have it here. So I know this is confusing because wine is made of grape. However, if you want people to mistake your wine for the store-bought wine, you want to make sure that the color is exact. And what juice do we have that has red color, you may ask? We have cranberry juice, we have fruit punch, amongst others. However, I prefer to keep it with one fruit. Therefore, I use cranberry juice for my wash, and I'm gonna bring it here. This is the color that it has. And yes, it's looking a little blurry. However, the blurriness will dissipate with time. And how do you remove blurriness? You can cold crash it. This is by putting your alcohol inside the fridge, waiting for all the yeast to become dormant and to sink to the bottom of the jar. Therefore, you can extract the top part that's clearer. You can either use unflavored jello to force your alcohol to clear faster. You can also use clay, and this clay will drag the yeast towards the bottom. However, using clay in something that you drink it's kind of questionable for me. I would not use clay because I would not drink clay, and for me it seems a little toxic. Another option is, and this one I've never tried, but they say that using distilled water makes your alcohol clear. So drop a comment below and let me know, have you used distilled water during your fermentation and does it make your alcohol clearer? So in this case, we have a lot of clearing to do, and that's the first part. It's making sure your alcohol is red. Another option, if you do not want to use juice, you can start your whole fermentation process, therefore use the water, the sugar, and the yeast, and at the end, add the food coloring. Once I did this and I've added the coloration at the beginning of the fermentation, and there was just a layer of food color right on top of the yeast, and the food coloring was red. Therefore, the yeast was red, but the main drink was not. So one tip I would say is to add food coloring once the fermentation process is over. So once that part is done, we know your alcohol is going to become red, so at least visually it looks like red wine. The next part is the taste. And this is based on your preference, depending if you prefer drier red wine or something a bit more sweet. In the realm of Porto, you have the option of adding the sugar that you like, and the more sugar you add, the sweeter your wine will be and the stronger it will be as well. Dry wine requires less sugar, it'll be less sweet, and will have a lower percentage of alcohol because sugar, when it's eaten by the yeast, turns into alcohol. Therefore, if there's less sugar inside, there is less alcohol for the yeast to produce. As for the sugar you add, it can be brown sugar or white sugar. I just wouldn't add honey because it gives it a distinctive taste. To measure your starting gravity should vary around the orange and green part of the hydrometer, because if it's too low, it'll be more like beer, and if it's too high, it'll be more like dessert wine. So this is in the case of Porto, for example, or if you want to make your wine sweeter. And for the specific cups or measurement of sugar that you should add, this is all going to depend on the sugar that's already present in your cranberry juice or any other red juice that you've used at the beginning. And to be honest, I tried this batch a week ago just to see if it tastes like red wine, and the fermentation was stuck. Therefore, what I did, I shook it up and I saw that it didn't help. So I added a little bit more yeast inside the container, but not too much because I do not want it to taste like yeast. And a little trick is, once your fermentation is stuck, to not add more sugar, because chances are there's a problem with the yeast, and the yeast can stop because either it's stressed, and it could be stressed because there's too much sugar inside your wort. It could be because it's in unfavorable conditions. Let's say it's too hot or it's too cold. If it's too cold, the yeast will become dormant and it will not eat sugar. If it's too hot, the yeast will become stressed and it can lead to off flavors. And last week we were in a heat wave, so maybe this is the reason why there was a little issue with my batch. However, let's see if adding a little yeast and stirring it up again helped my fermentation process. Therefore, let's open the jar and give it a little taste. So we see that the airlock is still bubbling, therefore fermentation is still ongoing. This means that more alcohol can still be produced. And once I smell it, it does smell like alcohol, and let's taste it. to see if it tastes like red wine. Put it in here. Cheers. Oh. It's a little on the sweet side, however, I do taste the alcohol. So there's a little bitterness in it, a little sweetness in the aftertaste. And if I were to test it with a hydrometer, I would say that it's not at 1.000, meaning that the fermentation is not completely over. However, if you like the taste and you do taste alcohol, you do not necessarily have to wait until the final gravity reaches that point. Once the final gravity reaches 1.00, that means that there is no more possible alcohol that this batch can have. The maximum level of alcohol has been reached. However, if in this case the hydrometer reading is not at that level, there is still more potential alcohol that can be produced. Why? Because there's still a little bit of sugar that the yeast can eat. And if you do not want to transform this sugar into alcohol, you can leave it as is and your batch will just be a little sweeter. So we talked about the color, we talked about the taste, and one little aspect about replicating red wine is the tannin. And the tannin is the bitterness of the wine, and we usually get this when you squish grapes with your feet. We get this by adding the stems, by adding the seeds, by adding the skins. And in this case, grapes were not even present in this homebrew. Therefore, you can add tannin powder. And what tannin powder is, it is actually those items of the grapes. They put it in a powder form and you can sprinkle it before your fermentation inside your wash. And this will replicate that bitter flavor that you're searching for to make your wine feel more experienced and have that aroma of aged wine. Once your alcohol is made, so after the fermentation process, if you want to age it, you can put it in those huge barrels because wine gets better with time. However, there are also the option of adding oak chips. And once you add oak chips into your wine, it'll be more aged in terms of taste and in terms of smell, that wood taste that's added to it. In order to achieve this taste and this smell, you have to heat your oak chips first. You can toast them either in a barbecue, in an air fryer. Just make sure these oak chips are hot. And depending on what temperature you heat them at, there are different flavors that the oak chips will impart inside your alcohol. And the patience is a virtue. Therefore, the longer you wait, the better your wine will taste because all the flavors will blend together. And if you'd like tips and tricks on how to make wine, cider, beer, you can book a class. The link is in the description below. We make multiple experiments. You can use either juice or water depending on your preference. We can adjust the sweetness for you as well. And if you found this video valuable, share with a friend. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you in the next one.